and we're ready to go.
Great. Welcome to our meeting tonight of the Police Commission. Are there any public comments? And you can use this time to review the agenda that we have. It looks to me that we have no public comments.
That's correct.
Okay. In reviewing last meeting, we had a presentation from Sponsors Inc. I thought it was a very lively presentation. If you didn't know what Sponsors was or what they were about, you definitely got that information from Paul Solomon and Morgan Jaco, who is the they're co-executive directors now, but she'll be moving into that full-time in due time. Any takes on the presentation that we had last week? Any feedback? Okay. We also did a final review over policy 805, the chemical incapacitants, and then we started policy 807, in which we will continue in March when we have Sergeant Smith back. So she'll be, we're going to table that until we have her back in March. We're going to go ahead and begin with our liaison reports. So we begin with Commissioner Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. The Civilian Review Board has not met. We had a training, and so since this will be our first meeting of the year, because the second Tuesday comes after the third Thursday, so this coming week will be the CRB meeting. I intend to bring the discussion of policy 807, the impact weapons and the passive resistance piece, so to them for feedback to you, but otherwise no liaison report, and thank you for letting us know that that's coming back on. So thank you.
Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. We got a great presentation from Captain Harrison at our last meeting, and it's looking like the 2022 preliminary numbers for hate and bias crimes is that there were 31 reported bias crimes in 2022, which is up from 27 in 2021, but very significantly low compared to the 51 in 2020. So we're kind of tracking that. And then we talked about 7 different incidents, so I'll just run you real quickly by you. So at the River Road Navigation Center, the Homeless Resource Center over there, there was a dispute between 2 roommates using racial slurs. One of the roommates dumped trash on the other's bed and was charged with criminal mischief and a bias crime. The second one was a patient at Sacred Heart Hospital who took issue with non-white attendants and nurses, and there was a physical altercation that happened, and he was charged with an assault and a bias crime. Number 3, there was a person reported menacing with a weapon. This case is still open, being actively investigated. There was also an incident at the Eugene Islamic Center on West Broadway. The center had just closed, and a man approached and attempted force into the building, making anti-Islamic comments and destroying property. That case is still open. We had one downtown where a person walked into the business and had a problem with their Black Lives Matter sticker on the table. An employee asked the patron to leave, but the patron would not. And that ended up with an arrest for disorderly conduct and a bias crime. There was also an incident on at McDonald's on 6th. And this one had to do with a pedestrian crossing dispute. And it was the pedestrian that was the instigator, yelling racial slurs and was aggressive. The victim ended up hitting the pedestrian to try to escape. And the pedestrian ended up in the hospital and was charged with a disorderly conduct and a bias crime. And lastly, on North River Road, there was a man suffering from dementia who got out of his caretaker's view. He was yelling at the store and singled out one person due to race for the verbal abuse and was charged with disorderly conduct and a bias crime. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner, Counselor, yay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wanted to quickly update. I think most of us were on the commission when we sent the recommendation to council about rethinking the different boundary lines downtown and how there were, if folks remember the crazy map with all the different lines. Well, staff had a meeting I had a meeting with the city manager and we discussed it, and staff had a meeting this week about this issue. She wasn't at it, so she doesn't have an update, but she was going to try to get me an update by today. It didn't happen, but I will have an update on how staff is planning to proceed on our recommendation on that for the next meeting. So I know this has been going on for a long time and I wanted people to know progress is being made, and I will hopefully have something, some good news at our next meeting about it.
Thank you. Commissioner, Vice Chair Dominguez. Bonnie. Can't hear you.
Oh, how about now? Hello?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. I guess the only one that I have is I was contacted by a community member who apparently has a friend that was arrested for possibly murder. And the community member was telling me that basically his information was put out into the media, and like the media found a picture of him, like a Facebook picture or whatever. And the article is very inconclusive as to whether or not he's actually guilty, but at the same, but that you get to that at the very end of the article. And so her concern is that given that he wasn't on the run and given that he was under arrest, she felt that it is inappropriate for the police to be giving out that kind of information that could tarnish his reputation because he's not yet proven guilty. So I guess my homework is to find out like what are the circumstances under which a person's name can be divulged, especially given that they don't, the police didn't need community help to go find him. So, and how that tarnishes people's reputations, again, he's not guilty. So that's just a concern. And I remember from having watched one of the, what are they called? The ad hoc committees, ad hoc? Yeah, it was ad hoc committees. Presentations, I remember that one of the people that had been there had been also concerned about this very thing again. So I think that maybe that's something that we should look into, because I don't remember having addressed that. And I also remember thinking that that was a pretty legitimate concern at the time, and I think it still is. So thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Hawkins.
Good evening, Chair. I was privileged to go on a couple of ride-alongs in the past month, and I have to say I gained even more respect for our officers and our dispatch staff as far as the work that they do, the pressure under which they're operating, and the short staffing, and yet the grace that they extend to the community and to the people that they're engaging with.
That's fantastic. Commissioner V. When?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any comments tonight.
Commissioner Mogart?
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I want to say that the situation that's taking place in Memphis has been on my heart a lot recently. And I really am sorry for the Nichols family and what they're going through. And I think that since the ad hoc committee had come up and we'd actually had a discussion about the ad hoc committee work at LULAC meeting last night, that it's time that we should probably start looking again at the policies that came forward from that and where the city's at with the work that was done on that front.
Thank you. Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, no comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. We had Officer Tester, her last meeting was last month, and she is being replaced, and I see his name on our board by Michael Clues. If you could kind of give us, tell us a little bit about yourself, and welcome to our commission, Michael Clues.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Michael Clues. Excuse me. I have been a police officer with the city of Eugene for 21 years. I'm currently assigned to the patrol division. In addition to that, I am also the union president.
You froze. Are you with us?
We might have to get back to Michael. Might not
Great.
have good internet connection.
Right. I think your internet connection is off a little bit, Officer Clues. But we're going to move on. I'm last on the commission as far as the comments. I also share with Silverio, Commissioner Mogart, the horrible incident that we saw with Tyree Nichols. And as we look at and talk about things like, we have a special crimes unit, we just want to know, we want to be content. And we had a very eloquent written message from the chief swiftly after the incident happened, but that was more than many could take. We also want to make sure that we still have where we at as far as, and he's gonna be doing the chief's report, but where we are with the Wow Hall update on the shooting incident. I don't want that to go by. I met with the mayor on Friday, had great conversations with her when she looks at her 4 points. If you got a chance, I would say check out the mayor's state of the city. Housing, homelessness, public safety, and climate control were like her 4 points as you're going into 2013. And it was great to meet with her, bringing a voice from someone. And that was great. On this Saturday, I have been asked and accepted. So this Saturday, all day from 9 till 7, I'll be one of the judges at the Miss Lane County pageant at the Armory in Cottage Grove. So that's what I had on my plate this past week. Next, we have our chief's report. Is Chief Skinner available?
I am, if I can turn my phone off.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair Boggs and Commissioner. Good to see you guys. I didn't get a chance to spend some time with you last time, so I'll try and give you an update. And of course, as usual, I can answer questions if you have those. A couple of things that are going on within the police department that are consuming most of my time and the organization's time is we are right in the middle of budget season. This next year's budget is a 2-year budget for the first time. So it'll span fiscal years 24 and 25. And so that takes effect July 1st of 23 for the next 2 years. And so we're doing a couple of things. We're trying to hit some financial targets towards the end of this year. And that means that I've had some money pulled from my budget to be able to do that. And so we're holding some positions vacant in an effort to meet those financial targets. And then as we build the next biennium budget, we're expecting some tough decisions coming out of that budget cycle and the budget committee that will suggest that we again have to think about and be mindful about hiring and how quickly we hire people in an attempt to try and right size what is a general fund that's really struggled through the pandemic, and actually before that with some loss of revenue. And so the state of the EPD force right now is we're down 26 police officers. We probably, all positions, both professional staff and sworn, we're probably closer to the 35 to 40 range. And so we will continue to try and emphasize our police officer hiring, just because they're the most difficult and the hardest to train and longest to train. And so we need to stay really in a good rhythm of hiring those. We have 5 new ones that are onboarding on Friday, and I think there's 8 that are in background right now. And so we'll see if they make it out of background. We started with 10, but very quickly we removed two of those candidates from selection based on some preliminary information that we found in their background. So we continue to really put an emphasis on hiring and recruiting, and Kara and her team are doing a fantastic job. This group of 5 that's coming on Monday is just a really, really good group. 3 men, 2 women. One of them is a cadet that's been with us for 16 years. She's going to be a great police officer. And then some people from out of state as well. So excited about that and looking forward to getting those folks on. The other thing that's happening right now is we are getting ready to interview for our sergeant's process. That happens next Tuesday and Wednesday. And we have 23 candidates that want to be a sergeant in this organization. There's never been a moment in time that we've had that many candidates that have wanted to be in a position of leadership. So we're really excited about that. But it's a heavy lift. I've invited Miles Pendleton from NAACP to sit on those panel interviews, along with a variety of other people. And so we're excited to have Miles there for 2 days. And I think he's underestimating the commitment when you think about sitting there for 2 full days through these interviews. But we're excited that he wants to be a part of that and help us make a good selection about our future leaders. Shortly after that, I'll open for lieutenant. We have some middle management positions we need to fill. And we're hoping that we have some good candidates internally for our lieutenant's positions. We've been functioning for a long time with what we call an acting incapacity in those sergeant lieutenant positions. And when you do that for too long, it makes it really difficult to have a good rhythm to the department. You're not quite sure who's going to be there permanently, who's not. Those AICs are designed to just kind of keep the trains running on time, and it's hard to move forward. And so I'm excited about the leadership opportunities as we move forward there. So that's the big piece of what's going on. There's been some really good police work happening since I've talked to you last. We had a double homicide up on 18th, and we were able to make arrests in that case. We had some cooperative victims and some witnesses. And we had a predicate incident with an individual with these suspects that it was kind of loosely tied. So we kind of knew where we needed to go to look, and things came together, and those individuals were taken into custody within 48 hours of that double homicide up on 18th. Since then, between then and now, we've had a pretty significant incident out on Fox Hollow Road where we had police officers under fire. It started with the ramming of a patrol car and then resulted in an individual firing out of the back of his pickup truck at an officer that was pursuing. Two man and woman fled to a home out on Fox Hollow that was not their home. They went in at gunpoint and forced the owners out, and then barricaded themselves and had access to all sorts of weapons in that house and that they had brought in with them. And then shots were fired at officers as we responded. And from high-powered rifles, there were some reports that there was as many as up to 100 shots fired at officers. So we're just lucky that we didn't get an officer killed that day or shot. We eventually tried to negotiate. They continued to barricade. We flew the drone into the house to be able to see what was happening. We saw that they were barricading and fortifying themselves in the house. So the decision was made then to use some gas munitions and incapacitants And the minute we put those into the house, the male subject that was doing the majority of the shooting immediately came out on the balcony and surrendered, and then called out to officers to let us know that his female partner was deceased in the house. We immediately pulled together a reaction team, went into the house, found that she had OD'd on a substance and looked to be lifeless. Officers immediately administered Narcan and stabilized her, brought paramedics in, and were able to get her to the hospital. I do not know her status as of now. She kind of was touch and go, and she was getting better and then got worse and got better. So I'm not quite sure where that is, but I think it's just an illustration of how dangerous this job can be. This all started with a traffic stop. And one of our younger officers who just showed such great composure in this. His car was rammed. He was pursuing this individual. He was being shot at out of the back window. He's driving a car at 75 miles an hour, talking on the radio, operating the MDT, trying to communicate with other officers. And all the while, on his body cam, we can see that he takes two seconds to have Siri call home and leaves a message for his significant other that he loves her in case something goes awry, and then gets right back in it and gets really back engaged. I think it's just an illustration of just the composure officers have under fire and their commitment to public safety, and the fact that these officers actually have family members at home that hope that they come home safe. So some really good work done there. Really proud of the department there. Lastly, I'll just say that, Chair Boggs mentioned the statement that I made about Tyree Nichols. I've had a lot of conversations in public about this. My most recent one was with Black Student Union Group at North Eugene High School. I had a whole half of a gym filled up with students and staff that wanted to listen to what I had to say and just to offer some thoughts about that. And I'll tell this group the same thing I told that group. I've been in law enforcement for 33 years, and I've been in I've seen just about everything that you could see, both as a police officer and as an administrator. And there's nothing that I saw on that video that even remotely I could even remotely create a story that would help justify what I saw in that video. And so I'm very quick to say that and say that there's absolutely no reason that I could offer to even give any context to that video other than what you saw, which looked to me to be just an absolute beatdown and punishment of a young Black man on the streets of Memphis. And so we recognize that when those things happen across the nation, that they transcend time and distance, land here in Eugene, and make everyone hopeful and nervous about whether that could happen in Eugene. And so that's why my statement goes out early. That's why I'm open to talking to people about that. And that's why we are so robustly reporting our use of force and have an attention to detail around our training. And if you might remember in the last long session, we have some legislative pieces of legislation that require the duty to intervene. And that's what you saw there was a lack of intervention by those officers that I have to believe at least somebody in that group recognized that as being excessive very, very early and chose not to step in and stop it. And our officers are trained every year, trained on what the expectation is on the duty to intervene if they see something start to become excessive or criminal or against our policy, that they have a duty to intervene. And we continue to see that taking shape in our IA reports, where in many instances over the years, over half of the total internal affairs investigations we do are internally generated by people that are actually working alongside other people, where we're doing a better job than some on policing our own, and recognize that we have to stay vigilant around that. And so I'll stop there and turn it back over to you, Chair Boggs.
Thank you. Looking for hands for any questions. We begin with Commissioner Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Chief, I'm wondering what were some of the reasons some of these officers are leaving our department? I know retention is always a challenge in any department, right? But I'm just wondering if you're willing to share with us, can you tell us what are some of these reasons? And then if you can also maybe tell us if there are anything that the department is doing to increase retention going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So really where we're at today is a byproduct of a couple of things. The first threshold event occurred several years ago when we had a little bit of a budget crisis, and I had to hold as many as 10 or 12 positions open. And anytime you do that, it has a tendency to have a cascading effect. It's hard to play catch up when you're sitting dormant and not hiring anybody, and then you're trying to ramp that up. The complementary piece to that is also, we've got the people that are leaving are people that are eligible or are retirement eligible. We've lost very few people, especially lately. We've lost very few people to just leaving the profession. Most, if not everybody that's leaving now has had a 25-year plus career. They've chosen to step away. I have to believe, the last couple of years through the pandemic and some of the challenges that we've had as a profession has contributed to that as well. Oftentimes when people are retirement eligible, they'll contemplate whether they want to stick around for a few more years or leave when they can. We have some people that are leaving when they can. So the silver lining in all of that is we don't have people leaving the organization as a result of a toxic culture or poor leadership. But every resignation I get is somebody that we are giving a retirement badge to and holding a ceremony for because they've put in 25 plus years of service. And so we want to honor them with respect to that. Retention piece is always front of mind for me. We try to do a lot of things and we try to do them very kind of internally focused for retention. We have a wellness budget. So we make sure we host wellness activities for our officers and professional staff and their families. We do that periodically through the year. We offer a variety of incentives. I allow people to work out on duty if they're able to break away, and operationally, if we can afford to do that. I let them come upstairs and use our very, very well-equipped fitness area to just blow off some steam. Just the other day, a great example of that is and how it looks in all of the departments. Just the other day, I walked by the records division, and one of our records specialists is walking on the treadmill while she's doing data entry. And I asked her, I walked by and I saw her and I said, hey, nice work multitasking. I went to a meeting, I came back, she was still walking, and I checked on her. She said she was on mile 14. And so, we've got little portable treadmills in the records area because it's important for all of our staff to feel like they can get some physical exercise, and we know what that does for wellness. So there's a lot of those little things that we're doing to try and incentivize people to stay. Like for instance, this most recent promotional process and the opportunity to promote, the opportunity to take positions of leadership is encouraging for people. And so we've got enough of that movement that people really are engaged and looking forward to do that. So those are just some of the things that are on my mind with regards to that. I
appreciate your response. Thank you.
Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Skinner, for the thorough presentation and for your continued leadership. I really appreciate it. And I just have one clarifying question about the interviewing for the sergeant process. You said there was a representative of the NAACP, and I really appreciate that. I was just wondering if there's any other community groups that you've reached out to be on this panel as well.
Yeah, it's really, thanks for that question. We have often had external candidates on our panel. Some of the last police officer hiring panels, we do have external candidates or external people on that from a variety of different groups. We try to spread that around a little bit. In this particular case, we tried to keep the panel reasonably sized. So you can imagine if you came in as a candidate and you sit down and try and have a panel discussion with 12 different people, it's really difficult. It's difficult to get through that many questions, and it's trying to manage that many schedules. So we have just a panel of I think 5 or 6. So we have a variety of internal people from all over the agency. So it's not just police officers. We have a dispatcher supervisor in there. We have another professional staff person in there. We have a representative from the association, which is important because those are the people this person's going to be leading. And then we like to have at least one community member on there. And in this case, it's Miles Pendleton from NAACP. But in every process, as we've moved forward over the last couple of years, we are trying to be thoughtful about having some external participation. And quite honestly, because of the commitment, many people that we reach out to and ask, they don't have the time to give up 2 full days. So like Miles is giving up 2 full 8-hour days on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. And that's a big ask from somebody that maybe has a job or other commitments. And so from time to time, people say, thank you, but no, thank you. And so we go on and try to do that. So, but we are committed to having external people on the panel.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, anyone?
Chief, if you happen to know this off the top of your head, what is the release process for information, for people's information? Because I believe that the case that you were talking about, like the double homicide, is the case that was brought to me by a community member.
Yeah, Bonnie, I'm not going to be able to recite that for you right off the top of my head, but I know that we have a policy about that. So,
Look into it.
I know how much you like looking at policies. So
Yes.
what I would say is the best course of action is to, and Melinda McLaughlin, our PIO director, we could have her on at some time to kind of talk about what our practice has been. I know we have adjusted our practices recently around obviously juveniles. We adjusted our practices around students at University of Oregon, especially with some of the parties. We've adjusted a few of those practices. So generally speaking, and again, I'll encourage you to look at that policy and make some recommendations. But generally speaking, when we have a case that's of significant public interest, that will weigh heavy for us. So if we have, and a double homicide is of significant public interest when we think about that. I'm not going to be able to get into the details because I don't know the details. So I would just encourage you to take a look at that.
Yeah, sorry. By the way, I missed the last meeting as well. I am in the process of finding a place to move to, so that's why I'm like, can you help me cheat a little bit on my homework?
Sure.
So
Sorry about that.
no, it's okay. All right, thanks.
Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, just on the comment of the public release of information, I think there's a very fine line we need to walk between, protecting people who haven't been proven guilty yet, maintaining that presumption of innocence, as well as transparency. And it's not always easy. I tend to land on the side of transparency and letting the courts, sort out the rest, because if we don't say anything, somebody's going to be saying something. And I'd rather get more factual information out rather than let people make up whatever they want.
One of the things that, your point's well taken. One of the challenges we always have, you guys, is that everything we do is public record, a matter of public record. All those arrests are public record, and the media can reach out anytime and file a public records request and get all that information. And then what happens is that absent us being able to drive kind of what the message is, from time to time, the media will kind of have their own message that they attribute to that. And so it is a fine line between what is the message we want to make sure that the community is hearing, what is the information we want to control that's going out there versus everything that's in the public domain and that people are just grabbing it wherever they want to and then posting it any way they want to. The other thing I'll say is, and this is another one of those fine line moments, is that oftentimes we'll arrest a suspect, have probable cause for arrest, and this happens mostly kind of in our sex crimes types of environment that empowers other victims to finally come forward, to see what has happened and see that this is somebody that they've been or had their child involved in and had some concerns. And we actually uncover more victims and are able to advocate for more victims oftentimes because of some of the outreach we do with the media. So agreed, it's a fine line, and I totally get the different perspectives, and there's probably not a one size fits all answer to every single time we have a piece of information that we share.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins.
I appreciate Commissioner Dominguez bringing that up. I'm not unsure of the proper protocol. I'm sure Commissioner Shivers can educate me. How do we make a proposal or a motion that the public information officer come to one of our meetings? I appreciate the chief offering that as an option, and I think it would be beneficial to all of us, as well as doing the homework to read the policy, but also to get that directly from the horse's mouth, although I'm not calling the PIO a horse, so don't take that back, Chief.
No,
Chair
that's-
Boggs, is that something that we can set
yeah.
up?
Okay, just you can just send me an email. I'll pass that on to Holly, and then that's something that we can request.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for the chief?
I guess I just wanted to say something. And sorry, I actually hadn't heard about the case of the 5 officers that murdered this person, but I was just reading a little bit about it. And I know we put diversity, equity, and inclusion in, like, we talk about that a lot. And I guess it's just something that I've been thinking about, where, like, coming from a Hispanic background, like, even when people say it, like I kind of get it, but I still, and I think I mentioned this before, I still don't fully understand like how we're trying to execute these things. So I guess it's good that we have this presenter today to talk about that, because like even in that case, like at the end of the article, it says like, what does it say? There's something inside of policing and the culture of policing that must change, because like even when you have officers that look like their community, you still get that result. So it's really about the leadership, and it's just so confusing. So I just kind of wanted to think about that while the presenter is presenting, because I feel like sometimes when people talk about diversity, they say it very confidently, and they're like, oh yeah, of course, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, all that stuff. But then like, I'm still always confused, and I don't know where their confidence is coming from as to like what it is that they're fixing or how they're trying to fix it. So anyway, I don't know if anybody's more clued in, but I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
One thing that I would say, just as a tee up for you, Chair Boggs, and for our next presenter, is this week our entire department is going through belonging training that's hosted by the Office of Equity and Neighborhood Involvement. It really is being focused around equity and belonging, and better understanding. And it's multiple modules that we'll go through this year. And module 1 was delivered last week and this week to our entire department around the concept of belonging. The really interesting piece about this first module is sharing the history of Eugene around some of the racial tensions and the segregation and the history of the state. And it really is nice to be able to better understand and get grounded in kind of where we've been, that kind of is that we continue to try and improve on through these years. And we actually have a member of this police department who is a descendant of those first Black families that were not allowed to live in Eugene, and she just recently left the police commission, and her family tells stories that are just unbelievable. And those are all very real experiences and stories that I think it's important for our entire organization to hear as we kind of figure out, to your point, Bonnie, what does this equity thing mean for everybody? Because I think it means something different for everybody, but we are excited about the belonging training that the department is going through right now.
Commissioner Mogart?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so I don't want to confuse this situation. It has nothing to do with diversity and the diversity of the department. It has everything to do with the culture of that specific area, specifically in Memphis, where there's been generations of young Black folk who had to deal with police violence. When I was a kid growing up in Los Angeles, we didn't matter if we were dealing with a Latina officer or a white officer. It was the culture of the department that was the reason behind the beatings, the chokeholds, and all the fear. So I don't want to confuse those situations.
Thank you so much for your insight. Anyone else have any more questions? I'll be starting off on our next speaker. I would like to read the issue statement. During the May 15th, 2021 Police Commission Work Retreat, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, was identified as an area of focus for the Police Commission as it relates to community issues and priorities in conjunction with the work that Eugene Police Department performs. The Police Commission identified diversity, equity, and inclusion as number 5 on their fiscal year 2022-23 work plan priorities and stipulated that DEI informational sessions occur on a quarterly basis for 2 years. Background. Mr. Damon Merkerson, I hope I said that correctly, is an senior associate athletic director for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongings, DEIB, with the University of Oregon Athletic Department. Mr. Merkerson comes to Eugene with his wife, Catherine, after working most recently as associate AD for academic and student success at UMass Amherst, where he also served as the department's diversity and inclusion designee. He previously worked as an administrator at Boston College and Temple after wrapping up a professional football career following 4 seasons playing football at Syracuse. Mr. Merkerson leads DEIB initiatives for Oregon athletics, while also continuing to work toward his PhD in higher and post-secondary education. I can tell you right off the bat that I have seen him play football. So this is no joke, a cat right here as far as playing sports and football. And we welcome you to our commission. And we have had DEI type speakers in the past. I think you bring us a different element. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Ooh, thank you. I feel honored. Feel very honored. Am I breaking up? I think my internet might be a little unstable. Am I clear?
You're clear.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mr. Boggs. I appreciate the opportunity to sit here and see and speak and spend some time with you all virtually. That was a humbling introduction of things that I've had the pleasure to experience and throughout my time, within college athletics and in these spaces. So I'm very humbled. I'm very appreciative again to do it, because I'm really respectful, and I really enjoy and love the idea of this commission's challenge to better themselves as well as to educate themselves, because that's with any of these different things throughout society, throughout the world, it all starts with education first before you can jump to action. And that's it's an admirable thing that you all are doing. So hopefully I can serve up some nuggets of knowledge where, that you can take with you, talk a little bit about how the work that I do with the student athletes as well as the staff. I'm going to give you a little presentation. So hopefully, again, feel free. I'm the type of presenter, I'd rather be in person. I like to use my hands. Doesn't always translate well, but am I freezing? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Am I here?
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, my internet just keeps, I'm gonna try to fight through it, but you all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Can you see the PowerPoint? Chief Chris, yes. Give me a head, you're my screen, perfect. So again, Damon Merkerson here, Chief Diversity Officer of the Athletic Department at the University of Oregon. Just a quick, and there's already a summary given back about me, but just give you a little more about my background. I'm from Passaic, New Jersey. I'm the son of a principal. My father was a principal for 20 plus years in the state of New Jersey. Always made it very clear for me to have a very well-rounded experience as much as possible. He was also a student athlete when he was in college. While our levels that we played on were different, it was a very telling experience to get from him about how to navigate the college athletic space. You know, the universities are such a interesting microcosm of the greater society because you have so much different diversity, you know, in its entirety, whether it be where people are from nationally, parts of the globe, parts of the world, race. You know, there's obviously parts that aren't as diverse in some spaces, but generally speaking, it's a very unique experience. And that shaped a lot of my understanding about how I engaged in the world, because as a student athlete at that time, you know, there were, as a Black student athlete playing in a sport that was a revenue generator, there was a lot of things that took place for me that always made it seem weird, right? And I think the experience, the story that I share, which put me down this path, involves my strength and conditioning coach. Loved them. You know, strength and conditioning coach in the sport of football, you spend a lot of time with them, right? You spend a lot of time with them outside of the position coach, or maybe you're like an academic counselor. You're with them all the time. And it was during one of our winter workouts while we're training in the off season, you know, Black History Month was coming upon us. I was a junior, and I realized, you know, 90% of our team identified as African American or Black. And in my 3 years being there, we had never done anything, any sort of type of acknowledgement within the athletic department about Black History Month. So I put on my hat. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the AD, come up with a PowerPoint slideshow to show throughout the department, right? And we're gonna celebrate Black History Month, like little small wins, right? So I do this, and right before a workout, the strength and conditioning coach comes up to me. You know, it doesn't come up to me specifically, but says to the group of athletes getting ready to go do a workout, you know, excuse my language, but you know, why the fuck do I need to learn about Rosa Parks? Is what he says. Like, why the fuck? Like, why do I need to hear about that? Why do I need to hear this? And I was so taken aback by it, right? Not knowing how to respond to him in that moment. Here, a role model figure for me, right? I like this man. I really like this guy, right? And he's a white male, heterosexual, you know, sort of in the WASP category of his the things that he's identifiers. And I go to him after like 5 minutes of absorbing it, and I go, well, considering all the players about to train are Black, I think it would be helpful, coach, if you show some appreciation. But like, well, how is that gonna? And he just continued to challenge me. And essentially what ended up happening is I got thrown out of the weight room. Got thrown out of the weight room. So that experience has always stayed with me, because it really shaped how I perceived power, and just appreciation and acknowledgement of a culture, right? You know, while mine was African American at the time, it could have been any other thing that were the students that, as educators first and foremost, in higher education, regardless of what the job is, your first job is to educate and serve students, and how that mission didn't sometimes permeate throughout the department. So that's my little story of how what sent me on this path. I always like to start with a land acknowledgement, because I think it's important to normalize these things as we discuss and have conversations, whenever I speak in front of people. So the University of Oregon is located in the Kalapuya Ili, the traditional indigenous homeland of the Kalapuya people. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, the Kalapuya people were disposed of the indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the coast reservation of Western Oregon. Has anyone not seen or heard this land acknowledgement to some variation? Everybody's seen it, we're aware, right? So okay, I won't go through the whole thing, but I think it's incredibly important. With my work, I normalize it. So whenever I meet with the coaching staff, whenever I meet with student athletes, whatever presentation, they will see this land acknowledgement before I do anything else. I want to check in with everybody here. There's, depending on how well you follow news, there's something going on everywhere throughout the world, right? I think if we all really like search through news, there are terrible things happening. But these in particular, from a West Coast standpoint, at least from our student standpoint, these are some things that they brought to our attention as well that was really, taxing. So I want to make sure I let you all know that you're human beings and, I'm here for you. I don't work with any of you, but I want to acknowledge that I'm here for you. And if there's resources, anything I can provide, I know we are in our day-to-days and things happen. It's quick and happening, but real things happen, life happens, and we don't know who this, whether it affects us or someone in our circle. It's always important to just do a temperature check. In regards to, you know, these three particular things are around the Asian, some that affected maybe more particularly the Asian American communities, as well as Tyreek Nichols, which I heard Mr. Boggs mention in the beginning in Memphis, or someone in the call mentioned in the beginning. So I hope you're all right. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Learning objectives. I'm going to lay out DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, in the way that I deal with it. I think there's many ways to look at it. I know this committee is around diversity, equity, inclusion, but I really urge you all to take some thought process about the belonging piece, because the belonging piece is really where we begin to make cultural and acceptance, and then we can move on to justice. So what we do here as an athletic department, right? We educate our student athletes about the diversity, equity, inclusion, and how we establish belonging so they can advocate and use their own platforms to move towards justice, right? Here we hear from the athletic department, we work from an anti-racism perspective. And I heard you all had some anti-racism training and education, so I won't get too deep into it, but understand that anti-racism is really a foundational piece that we use from a theoretical framework that can be applied to all the isms. You know, we start with anti-racism, we talk about it just because the framework within it is really good to be utilized and applied to whether we're talking about sexism, ableism, you know, all the things that affect marginalized groups, right? And then allyship, again, how we allies. I think that's the most impactful way from an education standpoint, whether it be directly talking about police officers or talking about workplace in general. If we can understand what a good ally looks like, and understand that allyship is not a card you take out and say, yeah, I'm an ally, or wear a shirt and say I'm an ally. Right? It's an action, and it's a continuance of, you need to continue to move towards allyship, and you continue to behave and make action that demonstrates your allyship, not post a tweet or, you know, do a great slogan that indicates that. And lastly, Be Oregon is just a way that our student athletes have, you know, we've helped support them to use these things I'm talking about to take action in the communities, in the greater, you know, the university communities, but as well as the Eugene community. It's going to be a brave space. You know, I may call on someone to, you know, give me your thoughts and give me your opinion. I want you to understand we need to focus on the idea. At the end of the day, DEIB work, in a nutshell, is about respect. When we all can have empathy and respect for each other, we can all make strides, but we all got to understand what respect looks like for each and every individual, right? Privacy, you know, this is being recorded, but this is being recorded for us in order to be together, right? So we're having some privacy. I don't know how this is used, if it's put out in the public or just for the committee's sake, but I'm gonna assume we're doing this for improvement of ourselves, right? Be willing to be uncomfortable. You gotta be uncomfortable. It is the only way for progress and process. You know, just like we say when we say to our student athletes in the weight room, it's always going to be uncomfortable coming from high school to college, doing those new trainings, but that's because you're working muscles and getting better at something that you didn't have mastery over, right? So there's a level of uncomfortableness. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Be willing to make a mistake. I had a session this week with our women's soccer team. We have 2 Black student athletes on the women's soccer team, right? And I confused them. I made a mistake. I know both of them well, but I made a mistake. And in that moment, I made the conscious effort to interrupt the next presenter to publicly apologize to them. Because sometimes when you have, you know, small groups of marginalized people and they get confused, it's a thing that is like, it's a microaggression that can hurt and damage over time. So it's very important to be very public about the mistake. And I said, hey, Bree, Bell, I made this mistake and I'm really sorry. It won't happen again, but feel comfortable letting me know if I do that to you. And then move forward, right? Acknowledge it and make it clear. Challenge yourself. I'm going to use terms like racist idea, racist policy, racist approach. Racist is a charged word, right? And I think, but at the core of it, it really represents policies and ideals, not necessarily a person's not in all cases, a person's belief that I'm better than you. But some people take real offense at the idea of it, and understandably so. But let's talk about why you're feeling that way, right? Whether it be being called racist, whether it be being called sexist, whether it be called, hey, check your privilege. Why are your reactions so a certain particular way, right? Think about that. Really take a reflective piece, and then listen with all raw openness and be present. Those are, let's not, I'm sure we got some great debaters on this call, but don't be listening for my points and say, okay, he said that point, so I'm gonna, I can't wait to get back and correct them. Like, no, let's listen to each other and gain the whole idea. Has anyone seen the awareness test? If you have, raise your hand. Who's seen the awareness test already? All right. Those who've seen it, don't say anything. My newbies, enjoy. Let me know if you can. I hope the audio plays. And it's not playing.
It's playing.
It's playing?
I don't have volume on it yet.
No volume. Okay. All right. I'm gonna play the volume of this one. I don't know what happened. All right. You're gonna see. Okay. How many times is the ball passed? Count how many times the ball gets passed. Ready? Go. How many times do we think the ball got passed?
Anyone know?
Yeah, you can say it out loud. You can put it in the chat, say it out loud. How many times do you think the ball was passed around?
10.
9.
9.
I don't know. I kind of lost track, but 9.
9. Okay. Anyone else? No? 9, 10. All right. Move forward. Did anybody see a bear? No? No one called a bear yet? Okay. Perfect.
Oh, yes.
Okay, for my people who have seen this video, what was the point of the exercise when you watched it? Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, just that if you're so hyper focused on paying attention to one thing, you're not going to realize what is happening in the surrounding area. A pretty cool psychological thing. Thank you for presenting.
Yeah, no, if you're too focused on one thing, your awareness is going to be very low on some other things, right? Yeah, good one. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
The context I learned it in was a psychology class about cognitive biases. So
do you remember? Can you talk more? I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Talk more
I can't remember if it was like the availability heuristic or just attention blindness. It's been a while.
Gotcha. No, appreciate it. No, thank you, Sean. Anybody else? One more. Let me get one more person. What are just thoughts, reactions, thoughts, anything?
Commissioner Hawkins here. I have to say that I was a little abashed at how quickly we all followed your instructions and looked to see how many times the team in white was passing the ball.
Yeah, we get really literal, right, and almost laser focused on what's presented to us. Let me ask this question too for everybody, and this goes kind of to Sean's point about bringing bias. Even though I gave you that instructions, was there anything else you noticed in the video? Like, could you describe something about the video? Could you describe anything else other than the ball? Like, did you only see ball? Like, how many people of color in the video? Did anybody notice? How many white people? How many white people? How
I'm
many
gonna
men?
guess there were 5 people of color, but I don't know because I wasn't really counting.
Okay, were there women?
I don't know, 2? I don't know. Long-haired people, maybe?
Yeah, so there were women, I think there's 8 or 7 people of color. My point being is even when I give you directions or instruction, implicit bias, your brain still fills the rest of that video up, right? You know, I think if I gave you all time and said, write out what you recalled, you're probably all gonna give me a bunch of different things that stood out, even though we were all given the same instructions, right? The instruction was follow the ball. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I'd also just like to point out that because of the context I learned it in about these things, I still don't know how many passes were made. Like I noticed on this video that it said, but I was just filtering in a different way.
Yeah. So that goes to tell you, just again, it's a great tool, and I think this video is an ad for cyclists. I think if I finished it, as odd as that may seem, but it's important, right? Our biases are playing. So like, we can't control our biases, as we all know, right? Like our implicit biases are our biases, but the only thing we can do is make ourselves aware on how to catch, observe, and notice those things. And diversity, equity, inclusion trainings and discussions are one way for us to put in safeguards so that we're more cognizant of these things. All right?
What was the number?
13.
Okay.
It was 13.
But how does that make sense? Like, so you gave us a task, so we were focused on the task. So what are you saying? Like when you're in the hiring process, you're laser focused on hiring, so you're gonna ignore candidates or something? Like, how does that?
Oh, it was just a general comment, but yeah, if you want to go, so no, what I would say is in your hiring process, your policies or procedures, it would be important that you try to eliminate as much bias that may lean towards one person, one culture, one thing or the other, to ensure that you have a process in which, you know, there aren't words like fit, right? Like there is an assessment like, hey, that's a good fit for us, right? Like what does fit mean? But it's something I imagine we all probably use at some point or another when describing how someone is a good person to bring into the company or space, right? Instead of saying fit, I would say write out those attributes and force people to use that language so it's reflective. So to your point, Bonnie, the point of this is more for us to be unaware of bias, how bias plays a role in how we recall and remember things, as well as how instruction can be helpful, but when we too focus and hone on it, right, we lose awareness for the other things around us. That makes sense. It sounds confusing, as I gotta say.
I mean, if it's worked for
Yeah.
people in the past, maybe I'm just not understanding it. It seems maybe with the rest of the maybe I'll understand with the rest of the presentation.
Sure. Go ahead, Sean.
I have a direct example from the police commission a little while ago as well. When we looked at the stops data and the disproportionate number of stops versus arrests of folks with Latin American heritage versus, the white versus black, the Latin American heritage was highlighted, and we spent over an hour talking about it, where the black number of stops wasn't highlighted, but it was twice the population. And we spent 10 minutes talking about it. So just the way data is presented to us can also really shape how we take it in.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple in a simple. It's an awareness test, right? Like if I tell you to focus on a candidate's skills, so on and so forth, but depending on how much information is presented, that everyone evaluating that candidate may not look at the materials that we've instructed you to focus on in the same light at a basic level. Makes sense. Okay. Sorry. So DEIB or DIBS, right? And diversity, the representation of, again, differences in our world and our workplaces. Equity, the power of the decisions that are usually made behind the scenes, right? Inclusion, a set of practices that, excuse me, sorry. that govern how we treat people, and belonging, showing up as our authentic selves. This is a popular graphic by the Robert Woods Foundation. Has anyone seen it before? Familiar with it, right? So we talk about equality, everybody gets a box, but we want to move towards equity, where we assign boxes to what the needs are, right? And then we're really getting heavy, we go to justice, we try to remove the barrier from a policy level altogether, right? So another way when we talk about being diverse, we talk about being welcoming, when we talk about being inclusive, I'll put it to you this way. If a goal of yours is to increase, let's say, Black women or women of color in a particular job space, right? And a company policy is, not company policy, but in bringing people to Eugene, right? Eugene being predominantly white, let's say from a hair care standpoint, there aren't a lot of options for women of color. So this employee is trying to navigate that space, and they're finding themselves having to go really far out in distance in order to get their hair done, let's say the Portland area, right? Or go back home. Now they're having to take time off, in which the other colleagues, because Eugene is predominantly white and caters to that demographic, there's 40 salons that do that person's hair. A way to be equitable, right, or figuring out a procedure to help support that staff and retain that staff is figure out and navigating ways to either get more resources for salons or support them so that they're able to go without having to worry about going 2 hours to get their hair done, right? Now that's very specific, but it's a way of thinking about it from an equitable standpoint. Yes, equality wise, everybody has a lunch and time off to go do those things they need to take care of, but because this is something that's affecting a very unique marginalized group, it may be an equitable practice to figure out ways to support them in those ways, right, to bring justice. Does that make sense? Do I follow? Perfect. Is anybody familiar with Dr. Kendi? No? So he's the author, and he's a professor at the out in DC, I believe at American University. Forgive me if not knowing the right institution, but he's out in DC. He's the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I just want to listen to him, a few words from him. You're not going to be able to hear it, are you? Because the audio is down. All right. That's fine. I can explain it. So what Dr. Kendi says in this video, summarizing it, he talks about anti-racism, anti-racism being the way we need to explain, we need to move toward using language as anti-racist as opposed to saying I'm not racist, right? Not racist has historically been a language where oppressors hide when they don't operate with any action, right? For example, I can say if there's a racist policy or racist procedure that just happens, or a policy that's putting duress on, Black and Latinos, right? The policy is strong. The policy, me as a policymaker or a person in working within the system who I can affect that, saying, well, listen, I'm not racist. It just so happens to lay out that way. Not racist is in action. Anti-racist is working towards to eradicate particular policies and procedures so that we move more towards an equitable space. So in his book, and then what he explained right there was, well, again, a racist through their actions is supporting one who is supporting a racist through their actions or inaction, expressing a racist idea. An anti-racist, one who's supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. It really brings to the forefront about how are you actually working towards eradicating system of oppression, right? So, hey, me, Damon, let me substitute racist and put sexism there. We have in our policies, this is not true, I'm just giving an example, hypothetical, where our women staff here the gender equity pay gap is severely affecting Black women, and every time we bring in or we make a promotion, there's a trend in which this is continuing to rise. Now, an anti-racist lens would tell me to look at that and try to explore, deaggregate the data to figure out where are some things happening here. a racist or not racist would be to do nothing and say, well, listen, our policies and with the opportunities we have are equal, right? It's still equal, like we all get the same amount of time, but the data and research may tell you that Black women, in this instance, have more challenges. Single Black women, the data is saying, have kids and aren't having the same amount of time to do extracurriculars outside of work, which people are grading in how they do promotions. So that's, it's still equal. They still have the same, but it's not a practice that particular group can take an advantage of. So by default, the policy that is affecting them is a racist policy. And then what we're talking about is racial inequity. Again, when this and within the policy example I gave is when 2 or more racial groups are not standing on approximately equal footing. And again, that result may be, out of an inequity that isn't necessarily created by the company or organization, right, in its entirety, but it's something that once it's flushed out, we need to really take an anti-racist approach in order to figure out the reasons of why this is happening and then work to abolish it. Any questions or comments before I continue? What are any thoughts? Any thoughts about that?
I have to say your comparison with racism to misogyny actually resonated quite a bit to me as a woman. So thank you for making that alignment there.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, honestly, in a lot of the things I do, while we have a designated person within our senior athletic staff that handles a lot of the things with our Title IX and gender equity, that's something that we have to spend a lot of time with here because it's just so vastly, underserved. I mean, we made a lot of strides, but it's an area we just got to continue to get better at and continue to grow and continue to be intentional about that thing. And it starts with shifting thought process, because when you look at things from an equal standpoint, right, everything is equal, how we have it written, but it's not equitable. And that's what we really need to work to achieve, right? And the best way we as a department here, and I think as most organizations, is really promoting the idea of allyship, right? So here's a quick acronym to help how I'm has educated and promoted allyship within our unit is, sorry about that, A, advocating and amplifying the voices of groups who have been silenced or marginalized, listening to build trust, learning to expand your awareness, yielding to the group you are trying to help so they can guide you as you help them. A big challenge for people who are engaging in allyship is they just want to jump right into helping. And that is not advised. I would say you must educate yourself and understand and build relationships with the people you're trying to work to be allies with so that you understand how to support them. Again, allyship, right? The process and journey a person will take to remove barriers, examine systems, and create new policies. Research shows that when allyship is practiced at an employee level, is where you have the fastest and quickest transformational change within your organizations. Studies have done this, whether we're looking at Fortune 500 businesses to institutions. This is one of the most effective ways to move forward within your organization from an allyship standpoint. Policies obviously have to be addressed as well, but when you can get the culture set within your organization, that's how we build better allyship and eradicate oppression within units. We're not going to watch this video because all my videos don't play volume today. But how do you demonstrate allyship? Who in here would identify as an ally? Do we all identify as allies? Do we all want to be allies?
Yeah, make the effort.
You make the effort, right? Make the effort. So how Sean, what is a way that you work to demonstrate your allyship, or how you think about going to demonstrate your allyship?
Yeah, as previous chair of the police commission, I was very excited to see the energy surrounding the application process. So I did my best to support that and bring new folks into the commission so they could speak for themselves and I didn't have to speak on anybody else's behalf or, try to.
Right, right. No, I appreciate it. That's important. It's giving people a voice in the platform, right? Being able to give them that platform is important. Anybody else?
Can you go back to the thing that describes allyship?
Absolutely. The acronym or the definition?
I guess that describes it best.
I mean, I can go real quickly with an example. So when I was doing environmental activism, I definitely leveraged my privilege and the organizational capacity of what we had. And I always pulled back from the speeches to give the stage to more underrepresented groups. And then, expanding your awareness, that's something I try to do every day in my journal.
Yeah, no, appreciate the share, Scott. Allyship and why I'm gonna spend a lot of time on this is because we're not gonna drastically change the demographics of Eugene, Oregon, right? Like I don't think that's necessarily the goal. It is to be more, we work to be more diverse because diverse workforces usually lead to more and better output as businesses, right? But the reason allyship is important, right? I think even more specifically, like for a space like Eugene in the state of Oregon, is we need people speaking up and having conversations when people of color aren't present. This commission is relatively diverse as I can see it, but I can tell you, I've been here for 7 months and I've sat on a lot of committees already within the university, and I'm generally one of the few Black people in there. So, and that's only the ones I'm there to. So why I tell the staff allyship is important, because we need you understanding, noticing, and speaking out and speaking up for things when you're the only person present, when there aren't any women present, right? When there aren't any, people who may have disabled, have able challenges aren't present, right? Like we need someone keeping in mind and speaking for those communities in those spaces. So that's where allyship as an action, and not, hey, I got my allyship badge and I'm an ally. No, it's either you're, it's either you're, this is going to sound bad, but I don't mean it in this way, but you're either for allyship or you're against allyship, right? There is no neutrality in these things. And the allyship model. So again, just give you some more toolkits, right? Ally to one, ally to some, ally to all. When you're ally to one, again, here's the pros. You focus, and this is a journey. I should mention DEIB and all these things are journeys. It's about where you think you're at in this journey. If you want to focus on trying to be an ally and be an ally to one person, the pros of that is you can focus on an individual, right? You can see direct results from it, right? So if you train those to focus on a person, the pros is they can help and support one person. The major con to that is non-inclusive behavior can be seen as an obstacle to overcome, right? So because you're so focused on that one person, you might start to think there is no issue for the larger group, right? Well, like, oh, well, the person I'm an ally to, Damon is, he's a young Black man in the senior role at an athletic department, man, he's doing great. It completely dismisses, right, all the other systematic instances and challenges that go with people like my demographic by just using me as almost like a token to explain it, right? So that's where focusing, that's where you end up if you only focus on allyship to one person on your overall journey. Allyship to some, right? Focus on a group, right? You see the world as in groups and out groups. See individuals, and you get more context, right? You learn a little bit more about that culture, right? You have a better understanding of them, right? Those are the pros. I think that's like the next line, right? But again, similar con, blind spots, right? The blind spot from you see yourself as the exception. So like, I'm focusing on women in their entirety in their struggle, and how we as men, myself as a male, can support. But now I see, no, I'm not the problem. Yeah, I identify as men, but I'm not part of the patriarch. Like, I don't see I fail to recognize my role as well within the patriarchy, right? Within the society that helps, and the society that pushes forward, perpetuates the challenges that, you know, may oppress women. Because you know, I'm an ally with that group that and those things and those benefits and privileges I get don't actually apply to me because I engage in my allyship. And this is where we want to end up, is understanding that we're allied all, right? You focus on everyone, including yourself, right? So understanding where you need support and allyship, and where you need to give support and allyship, right? And it's a reflective process, right? Understanding that we're going to need allies, right? And we want to all seek to improve the system, right? And I go to this empathy triangle. This is critical for anyone you train, any staff, anybody you talk to. So ready, I saw it, the ally, I saw it, the affected person, it happened to me, the source, I did it. All three of these people in these scenarios. So let's say, let me bring it back to you. Can anybody think of an example, or has anyone experienced something where maybe you saw a person you want to be an ally to, maybe hear a microaggression, maybe hear somebody say something insensitive? Does anybody have any situation whatsoever like that? Go ahead, Bonnie.
I had this really weird one, and somebody opened my eyes to it, and I hadn't noticed it, and it's actually kind of very cringy. So I've been hearing a lot of women be very sexist towards men, like very, and like for some reason I was just ignoring it, and somebody brought it to my attention that like their feelings were hurt. And I've been noticing more and more that like I would just keep silent when women were just like, and those guys and men suck and blah, 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 and just speaking in general. And I was just like, holy crap. So like, we're like trying to be like really pro, like bring women back and like make women feel better about themselves. But at the same time, we're also kind of starting to create like a new kind of like another subgroup, which is like men now. And I'm just like, I've just kind of been tracking it, and I'm just like, holy crap, I'm seeing it everywhere. And it's kind of weird. So I feel like it's not that I did it, but I'm staying silent. And sometimes the affected person is there, and there's just this guy sitting there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this poor man is just being shit on. So I don't feel like an ally yet, and I don't know how to bring it up and how to like be with these women and say, you know, I kind of feel like that's kind of not fair, and we're kind of being prejudiced here, and I feel like that's not where we want to go with this. I think we want to raise all boats, not like push down a boat or something.
Yeah.
So.
No, I appreciate the share. I appreciate it. Anyone else? Any other examples that anyone may want to share? You don't have to. Just asking. Well, yeah. Let me stay with your example, Bonnie. I think that's good. So I'm going to use the triangle here, the empathy triangle, because it's important to understand that in most instances, you know, I like to optimistically believe that most people aren't trying to come from a bad place when those instances happen, and it's important to understand that everybody in this scenario deserves empathy, right? First, it's the ally, right? The ally, it's first and foremost reflecting and thinking about, what did I just witness? Am I educated enough to engage with the person on it? And is this the right moment to engage, right? Because you need to take that time for yourself, first and foremost. Second, you go to the affected person. Right, you check in with them. And this is where I talked about earlier, how people want to be supported and have allyship. Is this how, you know, one, I saw this happen, John, I saw something that happened, and it just made me want to just think and check in with you. I'm not sure if it affected you this way, but, did X, Y, and Z happen? Did what X, Y, and Z say, did that affect you? And if so, how can I support? And if you want to be supported, right? Give them the agency, because John or whomever may just say, well, it didn't affect me that way. I actually didn't see it that way. And the last thing you want to be is triggering for somebody, right? Like trigger someone and make them feel a particular way. And then the third part, which we don't think about from an empathetic standpoint, is the person you think committed the act. They deserve empathy too, because honestly, depending on it, they may not have that perspective in this space that men can be, targeted in that way. Maybe because they're looking at it from, again, that perception, that lens, it may not even come upon them that they're doing something in a way that could actually hurt a colleague. So that's what's lost sometimes in the allyship thought process is the source, the so-called source. So I'll give you an example from my own personal thing. On one of our senior staff, on a call I was a part of, where I was one of the few, not the few, the only Black and young person on the call, the presenter kept making hip hop references and kept calling on me, and then started like saying slang to me in a way. And, you know, I was taken aback by it a little bit, and I didn't react in the video. What I did was I got the person's number, conversation, and said, hey, I just want to let you know, in this context, because there's so limited people like me right now getting to this space, you might try to want to be a little more conscientious. And I know that might just be your mannerisms and how you approach it. But when you give presentations where it's 12 people and 10 of them are white, 9 of them and 8 of them are men, and there's one Black person, you might not want to throw all the Black hip hop references towards that person. Like that could affect them. And I know you didn't mean it. I think you meant anything about it. And you know what he did? We talked about restructuring his trainings, and it became an educational opportunity, right? Because I went out of empathy. And then what happened later is some of my colleagues who noticed it came to me and asked, hey, was everything okay? And I told them, yeah, it was fine. I'm glad that you didn't need to say anything on there. I'll handle it myself. But had I gone after, or someone jumped on the call and was like, hey man, stop tokenizing Damon because he's Black, right? That's not productive or effective either in that sense, right? So this is where the allyship model, understanding that there's three people: yourself, checking in with the person, and the potential source. And then here's just a toolkit of how you can go about actually like speaking that to somebody, right? So I'll stick with Bonnie's example, right? Hey, I feel uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable when, so X is the feeling, right? What you got from it, right? And then Y is the when, the time it would have happened, and then Z is because. So I feel uncomfortable, when you make, grand statements about Claude because, he's not here to defend himself, right? Or so on and so forth. So this is like an actual language, and I could send this to you in a different format if you want to use it with other examples on how to like begin those conversations or how to train people to have those conversations. And then lastly, again, be Oregon, as I said to you in the beginning of the presentation, this is how we as the student athletes. So be Oregon is the call to action for our student athletes to be their most authentic selves. So what it started out with just giving them a platform to voice, and it turned into programming and initiatives. So what we do with each team is highlight a cause. I meet with each team to go over what their yearly commitment is going to be from a programmatic standpoint. So whether it be pride, whether it be racial equity, whether it be fighting against homelessness, we figure out how they're going to do programming that hits each one of these pillars, right? And how what that's turned into is it's a game highlighting these things, but now it's turned into programming and action steps, whether it be raising money for said cause and or bringing and inviting speakers into our student athletes and to our department so that we continue to have like these educational opportunities. And that kind of concludes my presentation. If I'm more than happy to answer any questions or hopefully maybe provide clarity or just sit and look at you beautiful human beings.
I have a question. Have you ever assisted, say, departments like say a police department that historically, obviously, Oregon, but where they've had a hard time with diversity as far as getting more Black police officers, as far as, what type of best practices have you seen or heard about in your work that might be helpful here in this venue?
you broke up on me at my end a little bit. I think I heard you. Have I ever talked to a police department about sharing best practices? Is that
Best practice as far as getting more minorities. If they want to increase minorities, what are some of the suggestions that you have?
Sorry again, for increasing minorities? My internet's upset.
Yes. Increasing minorities.
Oh, like from a hiring standpoint?
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think, yeah, for us, so creating professional development and growth that directly speaks to that population, I think, you know, right now we're working on helping create a sense of belonging, right? So I mentioned the hair example, because that's something as a staff and department, people are really having challenges with, and it speaks to their everyday lives. So like working with the salon area and getting a list, sort of a book of places where they have services that cater to marginalized people, is a great practice. I think from a housing standpoint, you know, it's at the University of Massachusetts, we kind of came up with, this is a bad analogy because the history of the Green Book. I'm not sure if anyone knows about what the Green Book is. We came up with that resource that gave all our Black staff and students, which had a list of all those different resources, right? All those different things where they can immediately help with that transition, because that first, you know, 30, 60 days is going to tell a lot for how, you know, the staff is going to kind of get, you know, integrate with the culture of your space. But from
Yeah, your internet's breaking up now. Are you still with us, Damon?
Oh, sorry. I am. Yep.
We got you back.
I'm here.
Gotcha.
Here. Okay, good. Sorry. Yeah, I think a mentorship program. So what we have for the department, we have an in-house one, and we did this we did something similar like this I worked at Temple. So at the Temple Police Department, we connected some staff with different units outside of the police department and within an institution. So we're a university, right? It was Temple Police. So they're still technically a part of the institution, but it just branched people out with people outside of the department. You know, I think the city of Eugene I've seen you have First Fridays, I think it is, where that helps kind of bring community, which is, I think that's fantastic and it's great. Programs like that, but I think I was talking about professional development before I got cut off. Professional development is that helps show that you have a long-term plan, right? You know, athletics struggles with this too. We get a lot of people of color every now and then and lose them immediately because upward mobility is hard and we don't have a true, you know, growth development plan for them. So one of the things I'm creating in-house internally is a program with the intention of helping prepare them for that so that they know they can stay here because they're going to get that growth and development. And the program doesn't, inevitably you're going to have to put money into this, but at the ground level phase, those programs can be just about mentorship and actual things that are going to grow them, because it demonstrates that we're vested in them, right? I've been in the 10 years, I've been at 4 institutions, and I can tell you, most institutions in our departments don't have a true growth development plan. And that's half of the reason why people of color are leaving, because they're not going to move forward and they don't feel an investment, right, in the overall development. And I think in our world, at least our world specifically, people think investment just means money, and it's not. They just want to know, how am I getting better so that inevitably the money will come. I just want to know how I'm getting better. Like, how are you investing in it? So I think anything that you can do around that will be, I've seen tremendous success in keeping people.
Do you have any more questions?
I guess, are there any more questions that you have that like, so you had like a couple of questions kind of at the end of your presentation that were kind of, I think seemed useful for maybe the police department to have. And I guess are there other kinds of like questions and like kind of like almost like sound bites that like the police department could integrate into their like everyday culture? Maybe other than just like what you provided in your presentation? Did that make sense?
A little. I'm really sorry. My internet is so bad, like because you're breaking up a little bit. So, like, do I have questions that I could ask of the police department or to integrate in their culture?
Yeah, well, like if you look at your slides, I think it was like maybe one of the last few ones, like they seemed useful, like maybe it was the one about like, hey, are you feeling comfortable with this or whatever? Kind of like questions like that. I think you also provided some other questions. And basically, I guess what I'm wondering is there, I mean, this is just a presentation. I'm sure you probably have like a whole manual or something of more tidbits kind of like that kind of can be a language that that like a culture could integrate into, or a police department could integrate into their culture. So just kind of like go to questions that, don't sound, stilted, sound just very human and also kind of caring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. So, basically, like some like things they can use in your toolkit, essentially, like some toolkit. For the officers, right, or the people, or whomever.
For them. For them to like to talk amongst each other, and like when you do have like, well, I guess even regardless of like the race or whatever, just whatever kind of diversity there may be, they can kind of talk to each other and say, hey, I noticed that somebody was saying this, and are you okay? And do you want me to like try to step in? But like other stuff, like I'm sure like that can't be the extent of how the culture changes just with this question, or maybe it is, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think forgive me, thinking.
Oh yeah, take your time.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I struggle because how to inform, police. It would be, that's an incredibly challenging job, right, and stressful scenario situations. But I think, generally speaking, the reflective process, that's why that's one of the reasons I try to start with that awareness, just about what we're aware of. I think what's beneficial for everybody, is really to, identify, understanding their identities. Let me ask you all this. Take 20 seconds and think about who are your 5 closest friends. Take 15 seconds. Think, just picture. I'm gonna plop in here. Who are your 5 closest friends? And if 5 is easy for you, go to 10. Go to your 10 closest friends. If 5 was a cakewalk. Okay, now after you did that, your 10 closest friends, what are the identities do all these, from this list of social identities, do all your friends, like, where do they fall out? Like, are they all, how diverse are they? What does those groups look like? What is their race? What is their ethnicity? Do you know their sexual orientation? What is their religion or spiritual affiliation, socioeconomic status, age, gender, sex, etc. And then think about how many of your friends' social identities directly match yours, because these things shape our perception, right? These are the internal things that usually shape our perception, especially depending on what are the things that are most forefront of our mind. So, you know, to try to answer your question, Bonnie, and like in a way that's productive is understanding what are the 2 to 3 top identities I take with me, and how is that shaping how I'm evaluating the scenario, right? How are those things shaping how I'm evaluating situation, evaluating conversations, especially if you're getting ready to address something, let's say like allyship, because that, generally speaking, those things, that simple thought process may help you pause and at least begin to question, because there are tools, there are things I can send you. I don't have right in front of me. I can send you some tidbit conversations, but at the crux of it, it's just about reflecting and thinking a little bit, like being like really having reflective periods, especially when you know you're going into a tense scenario, a tense situation. We're not going to be perfect. I think perfection is not possible, and you can't be afraid to make a mistake. That's where the brave space comes in. Understand mistakes will happen and you need to apologize. And I realize and understand how difficult that may sound in the age of cancel culture and being canceled immediately. But it's better to make the mistake, apologize in the instance, and be able to move forward and learn from it, because it shows that some acknowledgement.
I didn't understand. What about cancel culture?
Say it again.
What did you say about cancel culture? I didn't understand.
Sorry, no, I was saying I know how what I'm promoting to you is be honest, reflect, be truthful, and still communicate and reach out and understand that you may make a mistake. Like nothing I can teach, nothing I can give you is going to make anyone, mistake free. And not speaking or saying anything isn't the way either, because silence does not help this as well. So what I'm saying is I want to encourage people to talk and still try. And I realize how challenging that might be in the age of cancel culture and the fear of being canceled for saying the wrong thing, right? I think,
sure.
not think. There's books, there's research, Right Fragility, a great book. If anyone hasn't read it, to read it, talks a lot about why people, particularly some white people, have that fear of making a mistake, right? Saying the wrong thing. It's nerve-wracking. It's understandably fearful. But pausing and not saying anything can be as demonstrable, as saying the wrong thing. In fact, it's worse, because if you make a mistake, you can acknowledge and apologize that and move forward and get better. If you just don't say anything, right? We talked about anti-racist versus not racist. Not racist does the same thing as racist. It doesn't work against the policy or the procedure that is harming someone. So that I only brought up cancel culture as a way to, I'm saying, empathizing with the fear of having to speak up against something.
So like, for example, like if you're going to, I guess it's kind of like saying that everybody has diverse ideas, so bring them up, and then hopefully like you can actually talk about the ideas rather than like not talking about the ideas and then like nobody knowing kind of what's going on, I guess.
Yeah, I think, yes, being respectful and bringing up the idea, again, not being afraid to make a mistake. Hey, I'm gonna purposely make a mistake. So don't hear him say this.
Oh wait, allow me. Actually, I have one.
Go ahead.
So one of the things, so I was participating in the Black Lives Matters thing, and so I'm Hispanic, and like I totally got the whole Black Lives Matters thing. But then when you're saying that, so you were just saying that we need to be an ally to everybody. And the thing is that like, it isn't just Black people that are affected by the police. It's like also Hispanic people. And then in some ways I felt like I get it, but then it's just like, I was trying to rationalize like why we were just saying Black lives, because I was like, Hispanic people, you know, go through a lot of stuff too. So I guess it's just like, how do you be an ally? And like, I haven't told anybody this that I've been thinking about, and I don't know if I could get canceled for it or not, but it's just like, but what about like Hispanic people? You know, like, what about us? And
Right.
and it was also like what Martin Luther King Jr. was doing, was just like eventually he like wasn't just talking about like Black people, he was also talking about just like poor people in general. So anyway.
Right,
Wanted to say
right.
that.
So let me say it in a more abrasive way. So, hey, Black lives aren't the only people, you know, I just want to bring this up. Black lives aren't the only people that's being affected by police brutality. Like, what about Hispanic people, right? And you made that outburst, right? So you want to get a point across. I'm trained now, so I can go, you know, Bonnie, I definitely understand. And we're here, you know, I'm not dismissing Hispanic lives. In fact, Black Lives Matter is the name. It doesn't necessarily, Blackness in its entirety from a Pan-African standpoint, depending on the lens, covers a breadth of things. So we're definitely not dismissing what you're saying. And then as you hear me explain it, right, you'd be, as you understand, you see where we're going, well, oh, listen, Damon, I'm sorry, listen, my intent wasn't to belittle Black Lives Matter. I just wanted to make sure that, because I'm having trouble understanding it, bring attention to that. I think you can speak passionately. Yes, you can definitely bring that to the table and present it. You know, if you don't have the words, right, if you're not linguistic enough to like say it where it's applicable, start off with, hey, listen, I don't know if this is the right way to say this, but you know, this is how I'm seeing it, and forgive me if it offends anybody, but this is just from my community. No. So that's kind of like language, like the disclaimer, right? The disclaimer of, hey, this I'm unsure if this is the best way to say this, but this is just how I see it. And forgive me if it offends, but I'm just trying to bring this to the table. And then someone can go, hey, listen, I appreciate your contribution. Here's a more correct way to talk about Black lives. Here's a more appropriate way to view the phenomenon you're talking about. Because in my eyes, Black Lives Matter, Blackness in its entirety is more encompassing, especially because there's Afro-Latinas in the hit, right? Afro-Latinas, which I would group, aren't differentiated completely, although you still have your own experience, obviously, for assumed immigration status that may get applied on you, that doesn't get applied on some African Americans, per se. So like it's a more than okay to say that little disclaimer I gave you, right? You know,
yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm seeing this that way. That makes sense?
Yeah, like I'm just like, why are we saying Black Lives Matter? Maybe we should say something like police brutality sucks or something, and then it just gets more to the crux of the issue that many people are affected. But anyway, that's kind of what I just never knew how to say it, and I was just like, I wish we would change our slogan because it's more specific. But thank you for not canceling me. At least I think I'm not canceled yet. So,
Well,
and thank you for giving me language.
Right. Well, listen, Damon, thank you so much for your presentation. And I believe this subject matter is obviously things that we need more of, more frequently, because the more we understand, the better we're making our town and cities and so forth, state and world. So thank you. And we're going to be going on to our next part of the meeting, which is our 402 police stops. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody.
Thank you. We have Lieutenant Ron Tinseth joining us. And I want to go ahead and read the issue statement in the background. And then everybody should have in their packet the police stops, the statistical transparency of policing. The agenda item is to conduct a review of the police stops, which is statistical transparency of policing policy 402. Background. During the May 15, 2021 Police Commission work retreat, the topic of stops threshold at which a voluntary encounter becomes a detainment was identified as an area of focus for the Police Commission as it relates to community issues and priorities in conjunction with the work that the Eugene Police Department performs. The police commission identified stop threshold at which a voluntary encounter becomes a detainment as a number 7 on their fiscal year 2022-23 work plan. The last discussion of the stops threshold at which a voluntary encounter becomes a detainment was during the October 18, 2021 Police Commission meeting when arrest policy 300 was reviewed. Policy 402 was last reviewed 2017. So without further ado, I'll let you kind of take it from there, Lieutenant Tinseth.
All right, thank you, Mr. Boggs. I was brought here to talk about 402, and I think there's a couple of things to it. There's the statistical transparency of policing. There's it informs us on the types of data that we should be collecting. It informs us on what we do if people assert that there's been a detainment or a racially based stop, a procedure for handling a complaint of that nature. It informs us on training, and it informs us on reporting through our internal affairs staff. I presented here a few years ago. In fact, I've had this program since January 2016, which was well before we actually started anything, and was heavily involved with the formation of the format that we collect everything, and built the actual system that we use for collecting data on demographics for discretionary traffic or discretionary stops. To your point around when an encounter becomes a detainment, I don't know that this 402 speaks a lot to that. Really, the only thing that it says about it is that it has to follow legal and best practices and department policy. I already see a couple of hands up.
Yeah, no, we're gonna start. Commissioner Chivers. John?
On mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is they're both about 402.3. The first question is when is race considered a factor towards probable cause?
402.3.
Yeah.
Sean, it's considered a factor towards probable cause in a situation where we have a detailed description of a potential suspect that just committed a felony or a crime, and that their race would be an identifying factor, much like article of clothing, type of vehicle, those types of things.
Okay, that was my assumption, but wanted to make sure it was out there.
And that's why that's in there. It kind of, without context, looks a little funky being right there.
Yeah.
But that's why it's in there, is to allow officers to, if they have good information, to suggest we know the race or the description of an individual, that they could take that into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we might want to add a sentence that clarifies that a little bit, but
yep, already saw that.
Yep. My second question is that the second part of that, the last sentence, goes to the issue you were just addressing, Ron. When a stop becomes a detainment and what have you. And it says that if a reasonable person would conclude that they're free to go at any time. I'd like some clarifying language, maybe not in that exact section, but somewhere in the policy that just says that if somebody's asking, am I free to go? It is no longer obvious to a reasonable person, or they wouldn't be asking. And to me, that's one of the lines where we can draw, particularly in policy, between a casual conversation and a stop. I guess that wasn't a question. My second comment is,
You have a second comment?
Was there a second comment?
No, sorry. My second question was actually a comment, and I misspoke earlier.
No problem. Commissioner Lemons?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Commissioner Shivers, for asking a lot of the questions that I was about to, but I am also concerned about the reasonable person would conclude they're free to go. Depending on which community someone comes from, I don't even know if they would feel comfortable asking a police officer if they are free to go. I think having that badge and that shield and a weapon might imply there's just a power dynamic there. So I think getting the language very specific there is super important. And then my question is, I noticed in 402.4.2 that people with disabilities are not included in the House Bill 2355 to have to report about the stops. And I was wondering if Eugene can do that even, let's say people that are self-disclosing as they're disabled, would the city of Eugene be willing and able to keep track of that as well? Thank you.
It's outside the scope of what we're trying to get accomplished with this program. It's from the perception of the officer at the time. So we don't actually verify any of the data on the back end. Does that make sense? So we don't check to see, you know, age or ethnicity afterwards in some other database or anything else. It's all the perception of the officer at the time. And we don't ask the person we stop clarifying questions around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I get your point there, but people with disabilities are a protected class, and we do face a lot of prejudice and discrimination, and I don't really understand why that class was left out of this policy.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is the state system. It's the state data collections, the state. There's a lot of people, PhD researchers that collected this, as well as representatives from all kinds of different groups. We want to have the same information collected year by year. They've given us what they want to see collected, and that's where we're at. That's not within our control here to change that. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. First, just an observation that if the work item for the commission was this issue of when a stop becomes a detention, this is not the policy to be examining. I think the lieutenant alluded to that, and that's correct. So just bringing that up, that if indeed we want to follow that work plan, that, and I'm happy to discuss this policy, that the couple of issues I have is how it says in 402.2 that the department shall investigate, and it references the auditor, and this was done in 2016-17. A lot has happened, and I'm curious, to get the auditor's take as to whether the auditor's participation in investigation that's referenced in 402.2, if that's clear enough, if the responsibility is allocated as to who investigates. So I had a question about that. And then I just had a general question for the lieutenant. What's the line officer attitude about, is this functioning? Do supervisors have to, constantly remind people, or is this a functioning thing? And is the data useful? And I heard one of the commissioners reference that the police commission has evaluated annual or reporting data. But so, yeah, just curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that we are entering our 5th year of data collection, and we have hired so many new officers that it is part of natural culture. I get a daily report that I review every single day on the number of people or the number of stops, who's making them, and if there are any that haven't been reported. And I can say that as of this morning, there were about 3, and they were one day late, and there were people that didn't have a computer in their car. So I would say that, and we have an audit mechanism, and we have notification mechanisms that are very intentional to make sure that our staff are 100% compliant. And I would say that these are working extremely well. It's well ingrained in the culture. Everybody does them. Everybody does them on time. They're complete. It's been 6 months since I've even had a question on how to fix something. So I think that I think we're well over that threshold of this is a new thing and I don't like it. It's everybody knows how to do it and everybody does it.
Good. And as far as the auditor and the responsibility for investigation of suspected bias stops, how's that function? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not in professional standards anymore. I was given this assignment when I was a watch commander, and it's one of those assignments that follows you throughout your career. Is that it has followed me to 3 other assignments, and so I don't have a good sense for that. But what I can say is that in the times that I was in those seats, when something of concern came along, or there was an allegation of this nature, our supervisors were putting in blue team entries that notify the auditor of that.
Yeah, I'll just follow up just to let you know that Lieutenant Tinseth is right. We follow our policy on any of these complaints, much like we follow it with any other complaint. And those are both internally and externally generated. We've actually had several internally generated bias complaints. And so those get entered into the system, immediately notify the auditor. The auditor is able to access that information, actually craft the allegation, whether it's a constitutional issue or a bias-based issue. That allegation gets crafted by the auditor's office, and the officer is then by policy noticed, and then we go through our normal investigative procedure through internal affairs here up in the chief's office.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, so again, a question and a comment. The first question goes to what Scott Lemons was talking about. Is it my understanding that we would have to develop, if to take into account other protected classes, we would have to develop a parallel system and sort of duplicate a bunch of the work already being done? Or is it just that the state is not currently offering the check boxes on the forms?
Largely both.
Okay.
The state doesn't offer the checkbox. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we can write our legislatures about that one. The second comment is one of the weaknesses, I think this was in regards to Alan's question, one of the weaknesses I've noticed with this system is that when we reviewed the actual data, we had a disproportionately small number of stops of Latinx folks, especially compared to an arrest rate that was more in line with population. And that, I think, arose out of a difficulty in officers telling, especially off of a stop that's like, hey, how are you doing today? You're speeding, to something that leads to an arrest, which goes into a whole bunch more data. So that weakness in initial reporting when it comes to people who may appear white is the only sort of issue that I've seen arise out of the stops data, and it's a relatively minor one. It's been very helpful in many regards.
Yeah, I would agree with you. One of the things that has I'm not going to use the word concerns, but gets my attention is in the time that I've been here that the stops data has been coming out, we pay attention to that, and they're very good about highlighting areas or causes of concern around disparate treatment, and we've seen a variety of our agencies statewide kind of get called out. Portland Police Bureau, OSP, those are 2 that have a tendency to kind of be frequent flyers on that. But one that comes up for us is the I'd have to go back and look at this one. The one that resonates with me was actually the citation. The number of citations issued was higher proportionately with our Latino drivers. And one of the weaknesses of the stops data is really kind of the devil's in the details. You have to really actually go in and do kind of a hand search and look at individual citations to be able to see, okay, what are we citing people for? what's the trend analysis around the types of citations that we're seeing with one population versus a different population? And the stops data doesn't do that. They just lump in citations, they say arrests, and really what the work that needs to be done is kind of saying, okay, if we feel like we have a problem, we need to actually have to break open this data and go in and hand search and say, okay, are we disproportionately citing certain drivers for, say, speed or equipment violations, which now we're not doing, but equipment violations or what, those types of things. And the stops data just leaves a little bit to be desired with respect to the granularity to help us understand where maybe we need to be paying attention.
Yeah, and Chief, to some extent, we're kind of addressing that with the CJC. We got into a little bit more, we added some features to our system. Unfortunately, our data set is so small that it takes us 2 years to really have anything meaningful come out of it. So we're not going to know that question to your question or to your statement, Chief, for another year. But we are collecting a bit more of that granular data. We just don't know the outcome.
Commissioner Lyman?
Thank you. Yeah, Chief, I would just say that the one citation, the driving while suspended, where an officer just on computer information that a license doesn't have to observe a traffic violation, but can make the stop on a computer readout that the registered owner is suspended, and then if it kind of resembles the person, I would just chime in to look at the statistics around that stop, because that's going to demonstrate when there's no speeding, when there's no bad turn, when there's no stop sign, when people are getting stopped, and that should reveal if there's bias. So just pointing that one out. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
Chair Boggs, I have a comment. Does this get you where you need to be on this priority on our work plan, or do you need me to come back with something else that might give you a little bit more meat to work with?
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, I think Alan hit it on the head earlier that this is a really important thing to look at, and that it does touch on the topic of when a stop becomes a detention, but it doesn't really hit the meat, at least for me.
So my suggestion is, Holly, can we table it, get with Sergeant Smith with some of the things that we talked about today? And then if any of the commissioners have a piece specific that they want to talk about, maybe send you an email with that information, and then see how that can be incorporated. And then we can kind of go back to that, to this stops before we came to a vote. I just saw your hand, Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, I think it was Ron who mentioned there might not be a specific policy that touches on that distinction line, and I don't want to bog down our policy handbook too much. So if we can identify a policy where it would be appropriate to put in, that'd be lovely. If not, like a simple one-page new policy might be in order of proposal.
Chief Skinner?
Yeah, just as a way of helping move the commission along in the way of education, we could have Holly talk with Julie, or I could talk with Julie, and we could provide the commission with some resource material, because this particular concept of when a stop becomes a detainment or a social contact turns into a detainment is deeply, deeply discussed in Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which governs an awful lot of what we can and can't do. The complementary piece to that is whether or not we're following that, which I would suggest that in most cases, if not close to all cases, we do follow that. But that might be real informative for the commission to kind of understand what the foundational pieces of information are that would drive a policy around this, which would mirror Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals specifically, and maybe Supreme Court decisions around stop, frisk, detainment type of issues.
Concur. Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, if there isn't a policy that already deals with it from the import that Chief, you were just pointing out, I think a policy needs to be in place if there isn't one already, just so that officers and community have clarity on it.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Chief
I have
Skinner?
a question. I have a question.
Okay.
So under 402, 402.4.1, where it says, if an employee is informed or perceives from a contact that the person contacted believes they have been contacted based upon bias by the officer, the employee should immediately notify a sworn supervisor. What does this actually look like in the field? Like, I don't, like, how do you determine this, and like, what's the threshold for an officer? Because it just seems sort of vague to me, I guess.
So I can only speak for what it would look like in my experience. And that is an officer will notify a supervisor or a sergeant that a person they stopped has made an allegation that you've stopped me because of a protected class, and ask for a response from a supervisor. And that's what operationally it looks like.
Oh, it's just like an outright, like somebody just said this, like they
Yep.
said, oh, you stopped me because, yeah.
Yep.
And so I guess I wonder about like, what's the result supposed to be? I guess it's essentially a complaint, and then hopefully like either a reprimand, or maybe it was just like not necessarily because of that, and then nothing happens. I guess, is that something that the public needs to know about, or like that they can, like, I feel like if I were in a situation where I felt like that, I feel like I still wouldn't say anything. So I guess it's like, maybe, sorry, I'm talking out loud. I guess basically if I felt uncomfortable during the process, then maybe I would just bring it up to like the auditor or something, I guess.
There's a bunch of different inputs here, Bonnie, for people. And we've had this happen in a variety of different ways. So in your scenario, somebody at the time feels comfortable enough saying, you know what, you only stopped me because I'm, fill in the blank. It's incumbent on that officer to recognize that that is the perception of that person, and that is essentially a verbal complaint, making a complaint against the reason why they stopped. That officer will call their supervisor. The supervisor will come, basically do an intake with that individual and see to what extent they're comfortable articulating the way they feel in that particular case. That could generate a complaint that goes to the auditor for classification and then ultimately investigation. If the person isn't comfortable talking to a supervisor, then we encourage them to go to the auditor directly and with that complaint. And then again, that starts the process of taking a look at the details. And the beauty of Eugene is that in almost all cases, there's body cam video or complementary video that helps us better understand the context of the stop and the way the interaction went between the two individuals. So we try to give as many opportunities for people to be comfortable to lodge those complaints as possible.
Oh, okay. So that sounds pretty good. Like, given what you said, it sounds like it's not necessarily here, but basically you give them the option to bring over a supervisor and then go through that process. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, next we have our biennial report progress. Holly?
Thank you, Lieutenant Tinseth. I appreciate you joining our conversation.
You're
All
welcome.
right.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Lieutenant Tinseth.
Okay, so I wanted to just take a few minutes to go over our current work plan. This is a reminder, it's our 2-year biennium work plan. And I will share my screen so we can take a look at where we are at. Okay.
And thank you all for completing a lot of stuff.
Yes, we have been busy the past 2 years. And just a reminder, our work plan will end at the end of this fiscal year, which is June 30th. So as you can see, The items noted in red in progress are ones that we're still continuing, has been identified that we're still continuing to work on. And then the ones obviously marked done, we have gotten through those. Whoops, sorry if I'm working through this too fast. So again, I'm sorry, I keep going. Again, we have our DEI, which we just obviously had a presentation this evening. We do that every quarterly for 2 years. And then our one that we're working on this evening, number 7, our stops threshold, at which a voluntary encounter becomes a detainment. Sounds like we might need to do a little bit more work on that. I'll get together with Sergeant Smith and see what we can come up with for you. Sean, did you have a question?
I have a comment, but you can finish before you can
You
go
bet.
through them all.
Sure. All right, number 8 is in progress, our pepper ball projectiles, considering it as a default response as opposed to a firearms. Number 11, downtown safety. I know Councilor Ye opened up our meeting this evening, sharing about some of the progress that's happening with that, which is pretty exciting. And that is where we're at currently. So I can open this up to questions. Sean?
Yeah, there are a couple that are on hold waiting for state level action. I feel uncomfortable marking them as done when we've done what we can for now, but I would like to see us come back to address those once we have a better lay of the land on them.
I second that.
Okay, you bet.
So like stage 1 done or something, so that the city council knows that we looked at it, but that there's more to do.
Okay.
Commissioner Hawkins?
So because I'm new to this police commission, I have questions about the priority number 1, because it says in progress for officer wellness and mental health, but from what I'm seeing, we don't have a current update on that. And so I would like to know if this truly is priority number 1. I think it's great that we're having quarterly informational sessions on DEI and other things, but I believe this is my 4th meeting now, and I haven't seen anything yet about the officer wellness and mental health.
Vice Chair Dominguez, would you like to speak to that? I know that you were hoping to reach out to Commissioner Booker, and I know he has some ideas he was wanting to work with on us. Do you have anything you could share with us on that?
I don't have anything to share yet, but yeah, so my intent is to reach out to him. During the process of his interview, he said that he had a lot of ideas and was very adamant about trying to in fact, I think he focused on that. So I think right now it's open to him and us discussing more about what it is that he has in mind to see whether or not there's something in policy and procedure that we could integrate with his ideas given his military background. So if we have had in the past some wellness and mental health presentations that I could try to find for you, because we did have people come talk to us about them. I guess it might have been just before you came on board. So that's what you're seeing right there. And maybe because my understanding is I think you also have a medical background. So if you have any kind of input, I'd love to.
That was going to be my next
question.
question. Is there a committee for this, or is this a Commissioner Booker project?
No, it's a commissioner. It can be a Commissioner Hawkins project.
That's what I get for speaking up. But yes,
So
I'm very, very interested in this, and I would like to certainly be a part of whatever is being done on the commission side.
Oh, okay, great. Well then, when I set up, sorry, I'm in the middle of the process of moving and finding.
I know
places
you've got
to
a
and
lot
stuff.
going on, Vice Chair.
Yeah, so but yeah, so I'll include you in on that email to set up that conversation with them.
Thank you.
And if anybody else is interested, well, actually, I don't know about public meeting laws, so we'll figure that out. But, yes, so at least 3 of us will be on there, and then maybe we could discuss further.
Right. Commissioner Dr. Booker is in England. He tried to get on, he couldn't get connection. So he's out of the country right now. He is very much enthusiastic, waiting to get with Vice Chair Dominguez, and they can speak, and he has his idea. But just like we had Dr. Johnny Lake speak about DEI. I believe we had a whole different type of speech about DEI today with Damone Murkison. Same subject matter, two different voices. Well, so no, under no circumstances is it one commissioner's project. If you have some ideas and so forth, my ears are 100% welcome to hear them. And let's see who we could bring to the table to help satisfy that. But don't forget, everybody, we have in May, we're going to be having our off-site work session. So that's where you need to be generating your thoughts on what things that you want that's very, very important to you. And you need to be thinking of those three, 2 or 3 things that's important to you that we start on our next 2-year work plan. Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we wanted to make it a little bit more official by making it an official subcommittee charged with bringing a few suggestions, because officer wellness is it's a perennial issue. We heard today about a couple of really critical incidents, but it's also very broad and kind of vague. So especially with the work retreat coming up, if we want to empower a subcommittee to bring a few, specific suggestions about what policies exactly we want to look at, I'd be open to making the motion, but I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts on it.
What would that mean that we would could we have a bigger group than just 3?
You could, it would be then subject to public meeting laws. So it'd have to be publicly recorded. It would probably be more trouble than it was worth, but it might open some doors to say like, oh yeah, I'm chair for the police commission's, mental health advisory team, especially when it comes to city staff.
Sean, is that something maybe we'd like to bring forth at our offsite work retreat and maybe work on that for our next?
Yeah, I was thinking that they would bring suggestions to the work retreat for specific proposals. Okay. But I'd love all input on this idea. Yeah,
Commissioner Mogart?
Yeah, as far as I understood, 2 is the threshold for public meeting, the public meeting law. So if you have 3, that's a public meeting.
No, it's quorum. It's got to be under quorum.
Any more questions?
Do we have an action from this conversation?
Oh yeah, right, sorry.
Yeah, unless there are any objections, I would like to propose to appoint Bonnie, the chair of a subcommittee, to bring recommendations about officer wellness to our work retreat, and have Jensina and Dr. Booker both assigned to the commission.
And is there anyone else that would like to be on this commission? Be on this subcommittee dealing with mental health?
I absolutely.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Second this motion.
I was going to try to find a way to hold your hand up for you, man.
Thank you, Scott. I would love to be on it, but I have too many work obligations currently, unfortunately.
Well, if you have any ideas, please send them along. We could discuss them.
Okay, so Commissioner Shivers has brought a motion that we do a subcommittee for mental health, and recommended that Vice Chair Bonnie Dominguez be in charge of that. Those in favor, and do we have a second? We had a second from Commissioner Lemon, from Scott. So those in favor with said motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. So Bonnie, take charge of this, and anything that you need from my end, I'll do what I can. And also reach out to Sean. He might have some ideas as well. He might not have time to chair this thing, but he has a lot of wisdom and thought that he could do. So we'll go from there.
When will Dr. Booker be back? Do you know?
Dr. Booker will be back in March.
Okay, thank you.
And I do want to just add real quick before we wrap up tonight. I will be sending out some dates in May for our offsite retreat. This typically happens on a Saturday and it's like a half day. We'll feed you. I would really like to encourage that we all meet in person. I'm trying to find a meeting space that would allow for us to be separated. You can wear a mask. So you'll have safety that way. But I will be sending out an email soon, hopefully identifying some dates. For that. So thank you. And that's all that I had.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we'll begin with our closing statements. Commissioner Lyman.
No, I don't have anything other than I just sent out on the chat to Holly that I think just given that there was some expression of however you want to characterize it around what constitutes a public meeting, a brief email from Holly to us after a check-in with the city attorney, but that's it. Thank you for a productive meeting, and the training was useful and informative. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really happy actually that we have created this new subcommittee focusing on mental health for police commissioners or for police officers. Apologize. And I also just wanted to thank Damon for his amazing presentation, but also bring in that perspective of inclusivity, belonging, and also intersectionality. And as a person with a disability, I really appreciate that he considered ableism as well. So anyways, yeah, that's where my comments are. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ye. Councilor Ye. And she had to step out. Commissioner Dominguez.
Well, actually, I wanted to make a comment that would relate to the counselors. We'll save that for next time. Darn it. Okay, anyway. I'm glad that we created this little thing, and now there's a little bit more pressure for me to work on it. So we'll do it. It'll be great. And yeah, and thank you all for letting me ask my million questions about DEI. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Hawkins.
You know, as a female person of color married to a man of another color, I tend to think I know it all already when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And the presentation tonight was still very eye-opening, and thought-provoking. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn.
I don't have any closing comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for setting up the presentation, and it's very informative. Other than that, no comments.
Commissioner Mogart.
No comments at this time.
Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, I just want to thank Bonnie for being willing to step up and do more work, as well as Jensina, and hopefully Dr. Booker agrees as well. I don't underestimate the amount of work that goes into everything that y'all are doing. And thank you.
Thank you. And I have nothing. I'm going to use my time. We had a moment, and then he froze. So, if Michael, are you here? Can you kind of do a little not a presentation, just a little quick 2 minutes about yourself and how long you've been with the EPD, and welcome aboard our commission.
Certainly, thank you. Michael Clues, EPD, 21 years. Currently assigned to patrol. I do most of the MCI or major collision investigation. So if you have a really, really bad day or your last day in a car, I use mathematics to kind of put it all back together and tell you what happened. I was born and raised in Germany. When I was 13, I moved to California with my mom and my sister into the Bay Area, a little place called Castro Valley, California. I got a scholarship to play football at the University of Oregon and did so from 94 through 98. During college, I met my wife, who was a dispatcher for us and currently works at the ERC. And we have 3 children. They're all grown. I'm trying to get them out of my house, but somehow they keep finding the key. I don't know how that is. And let's see what else. It's kind of it. I've been the union president for, I think, going up on 8 years now. I've been a part of the union for 10, something like that. I lost track of time, to be very frank with you. And I look forward to being here and listening and being what it's all about.
And you just recently came back from Germany.
I've been to Germany a couple of times, yes. I was in Germany in June. My sister is a German teacher, and we take a class of teenagers over to Germany every 2 to 3 years and show them basically Europe for 2 weeks. And yeah, it's stressful, but super fun.
Well, thank you very much. We will definitely appreciate your insight, and me and you will catch up because we have our little meeting to get together. And this concludes our meeting. Thank you very much for all your participation. Meeting's adjourned.